Hi, the internet. My name is Ben. I spent 16 years as an employee of the Catholic Church, including the last 3 as an assistant principal of a Catholic school, and Donald Trump made me an atheist. Hey everyone, welcome back. Sorry about last week. I had a lot of things going on in my personal life and knew I couldn't put out a video in time. Hey, patrons got access to an exclusive video of me dunking on the Catholic Church's stance on homosexuality. I had a lot of fun with that video. Created it a while ago, and I'm still hesitant to put it up in public yet for reasons. If you would like access to that, just become a patron. Even $3 a month, and I will gladly let you have access to that video. And there may be other situations where I post patron-only videos. But we are back to how Donald Trump made me an atheist. This is part 9. This may be a bit of a shorter video today, even still. We'll see. I've said that before and been wrong. But before I really get into the meat of episode 9, I need to apologize for the fact that I missed some things in episode 8. I can't believe I didn't cover this stuff, but I didn't. I don't know what I was drinking, or I don't know, maybe I was off that day. So I script most of these episodes out completely and then kind of go on some tangents where I have an idea of what I want to say, but I intentionally don't script it out because I'm very charming sometimes when I'm off the cuff. The other edge of that sword, though, is that sometimes I forget to hit things that are really important. So here's what I missed. In episode 8, I was discussing how people with God models respond when those models don't produce accurate results. I said people construct God models and say, if my God model is accurate, then we might get these measurable results in reality. The specific instance I gave was, if my God model is correct, then gay people in gay relationships won't exhibit the same type of love, affection, and fidelity that I see in heterosexual relationships. Then I went to college, I went into the real world, I met people from different worldviews than my own, and found that homosexual people do, in fact, have rewarding and fulfilling relationships. So then I'm faced with some cognitive dissonance about what I'm going to do next. Am I going to change my model of God, which is really challenging? It's really hard for people to accept that their model of God is wrong. And so you either have to adjust your model of God, which is the intellectually honest thing to do, or you can deny that the evidence says what it says. I won't rehash this completely because I discussed it at length in the last episode, but what I didn't mention is how it produces so often heard responses to atheistic claims. When people say, you were never a real Christian, or you were never a true Christian, they are employing this exact argument. When they accuse an atheist of never having been a true Christian, what they're doing is saying this: if my God model is correct, then no one would ever leave the faith on the grounds that they are no longer convinced of God's existence. That's their first premise. If A, then B. If my God model is correct, then no one would ever leave the faith on grounds that they no longer are convinced that God is real. Then they go on to have an interaction with a Christian. Let's call it person P. And person P says that they no longer believe in the Christian faith because they are no longer convinced of God's existence. This believer is faced with some cognitive dissonance. They can adjust their God model, that's what they ought to do, and say, okay, so somehow people can leave the faith on purely intellectual grounds. Or they can say, no, that's not what happened. Person P didn't leave the faith because they were just no longer convinced. They left the faith because they were never a true Christian. They never really believed. So my God model hasn't been falsified. If my God model is correct, then no one would leave the faith on the grounds that they're no longer convinced. So what they're saying is, this person didn't leave the faith. They were never in the faith. Boom, I'm out. Don't have to worry about this person P. Or they'll say, you left the faith because you wanted to sin. It's exactly the same out. What they're suggesting is that you do still believe. You aren't unconvinced that God exists. You know God exists. You're leaving the faith because you want to sin. Either one of those excuses satisfies their cognitive dissonance. It's intellectually dishonest, but it does the trick. They can retain their rationality by saying, if A, then B, not B. Oh, wait, nope, this wasn't a counterexample of B at all. That wasn't an issue. I'm good. Of course, What they don't recognize is that they're just taking their God model and pushing it to a place where it can never be falsified. It cannot be challenged. That's a long aside of a topic I should have finished off in the last episode. Mea maxima culpa. Let's get into the topic of today, which is refuting the argument I held up in episode 3, namely that the God of classical theism is more likely than not to exist because of the state of the universal constants. Let me start by talking about this in purely rational terms, because I think this argument falls apart at the first hurdle, and it's hard to understand why, especially if you've been raised in a world where classical theism is all around you. Let's try it out though. Let's give it a go. I think this argument buries itself in the opening. Let me try and explain why I think it's circular. I'm not convinced I've got my understanding of this fully worked out, but let's think this through. Let's try and set up the teleological argument into a syllogistic form. Premise 1, the universal constants seem finely tuned for the existence of human life. Premise 2, the God of classical theism would sufficiently explain why the universe is created in such a way that it seems finely tuned for human life. And then the conclusion, the loving God of classical theism is more likely than not to exist. So it's not even an inferential argument, it's more of an abductive argument, right? It's one that's built on probabilities. That's what they're saying, and that's what I've said. And it feels good, right? Okay, we've got this seemingly arbitrary and unlikely set of events that have happened. It seems like someone's rigging the deck for us, or as von Inwagen put it, someone's rigged the drawing in our favor. And okay, sounds good. But let's try and restate it in a way where we don't bury classical theism inside the arguments, and let's pretend like we don't know what classical theism is. We don't know what a loving God is. That's where I think this turns into a circular argument. Here we go. Premise 1, the universe has certain features that exist in certain numerical ranges that are both seemingly arbitrary and 2, necessary for being in such ranges for human life to exist. Premise 2, the existence of a supernatural being that's capable of creating universes and wants human beings to exist would more likely than not create a universe in which human beings can exist. Conclusion, a supernatural being that is capable of producing universes and wants humans to exist is itself more likely to exist. Yeah, I think we buried that right in premise 2. We presented the possibility of the existence of a being that we have no evidence of to provide evidence for that being's very existence. I mean, I think that's what's going on here, right? We've hypothesized the existence of a being and said, well, if a universe-creating being exists, then it would create universes. Well, yeah, I guess it would, I guess. If a universe-creating being wanted humans to exist, then the universe-creating being would make a universe with humans in it. And I actually dismissed this argument long before I recognized its circularity. So if you're a theist and you're going, I don't think so, Ben, I think you're off on this one. Well, then let's compare it to a scientific hypothesis, and let's pick gravity. Apparently, that's the only analogy I have. And we're picking gravity because it's the analogy I've been using this entire series, and I think it works. I think it really is a helpful one. Newton hypothesizes gravity being caused by the mass of bodies, but he couldn't explain how or why that would be the case. Why would it be the case that a sun 93 million miles away could cause the Earth to behave the way it does? So couldn't a theist say, well, didn't Newton just define gravitation into existence? Didn't Newton say, well, okay, I, Isaac Newton, assert that the sun is the thing that makes the Earth do the things that the Earth does. Hey, look, the Earth is doing the thing that the Earth does, therefore it's the sun. Newton has just said that gravity is the thing that makes things do what things do? Isn't that a circular argument, Isaac Newton? And the answer is, of course, no, it's not. Actually, Newton didn't explain how or why gravity worked. He didn't understand the mechanism for how the sun actually caused the Earth to move through its courses, but he just realized that it did. And if you were a skeptical person around Newton's era and you said, Isaac Newton, I'm not seeing the causal link here. You'd be right. You'd have a point there. And then Newton would show you his universal law of gravity and would say, okay, you're right. I haven't demonstrated a causal link, but look at this equation. This equation only includes the masses of the two bodies and how far apart they are, and we can test it on things. And when we do, it's going to produce workable results. And so you're right, we are never confirming that the sun is the thing causing the Earth to move through its orbit, but if the sun were the thing causing the Earth to move through its orbit, it would do it exactly like this. And if the sun causes the Earth to do what it does the way I think it does, then we'll get all these other results. And we do get all those other results. In order for the God model to have weight anywhere near that of Newton's model of gravitation, we would need it to make predictions. So if we want to talk about a God that can produce universes, we need to show that universes keep getting produced, right? That would be consistent with a being that can create universes. If you just didn't accept Newton's hypothesis that massive bodies can act on each other at a distance purely because of their mass, if you said, okay, it's an assertion and it has some explanatory power for maybe how the planets move, and it would also, I guess, explain why apples fall from trees, you would have been rationally justified to be skeptical of that. You would have been rationally justified to say, you seem to be suggesting that without any evidence. You've just sort of retconned reality into saying masses attract each other. Well, wait a minute. We don't know that it's their mass that's attracting each other. You would have had a point until he produced an equation that made predictions. Numerical, quantifiable predictions that kept coming true. I say to the theist, wait a minute, how can you possibly assert that the thing that created this universe is a thing capable of creating universes when you have no way of showing me that a thing capable of creating universes could even exist? Now let's circle back to the adage of wisdom I quoted from Peter von Inwagen. Yeah, I'll roll the clip. This is from a previous episode. Suppose there is a certain fact that has no known explanation. Suppose that one can think of a possible explanation of that fact, an explanation that, if only it were true, would be a very good explanation. Then it is wrong to say that that event stands in no more need of an explanation than an otherwise similar event for which no such explanation is available. Right. This principle here, it's garbage. I've been looking at it for a while now, and I don't know that I'm smart enough to be able to pick apart exactly how it's fallacious. But we're going to reductio ad absurdum this thing out of existence. So here we go. I want you to imagine an unsolved murder. An LA man is found murdered in his apartment, gruesomely and painstakingly. The coroner reports that this man was tortured for hours, ultimately succumbing to his injuries at approximately 5 p.m. Pacific time, plus or minus 20 minutes. At 5:01 p.m., the couple next door exits their apartment to see Neil deGrasse Tyson emerging from the victim's apartment. They recognize him instantly as they happen to both be major Neil deGrasse Tyson fans. They ask for his autograph and he indulges them. They chat for a few minutes and the couple leaves, unaware that their neighbor has been gruesomely murdered. Other than their overwhelming fondness for Neil deGrasse Tyson, this is a regular, normal couple. They both passed a polygraph test. Their backstories check out completely. The police have interrogated them, and their story has stayed consistent. They have no criminal history, and actually, based on this tip, the police check the fingerprints found at the scene of the crime, run them against a database, and confirm that the fingerprints of Neil deGrasse Tyson are on the scene. Based on this lead, the police obviously go to investigate Neil deGrasse Tyson as soon as they possibly can, only to find that he is in New York City and has been in New York City since the time of the murder. And in fact, at 5:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Neil deGrasse Tyson was in the Hayden Planetarium giving a lecture to a crowded hall full of people who can all affirm that they were there. And the lecture was broadcast simultaneously over the internet for thousands, millions of people to watch at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The police think about it for a while, and then the lead investigator has an epiphany. Neil deGrasse Tyson, he says, pausing for effect, is a time traveler. He finished his lecture at the Hayden Planetarium, traveled back in time, and then also took a plane to the Pacific coast, went to our victim's apartment, slaughtered him mercilessly, then traveled back to the present into New York City. Boom. Based on this detective's hunch, the chief of police opens his big book of epistemological quotes and finds this from John Leslie. It says, "Suppose there is a certain fact that has no known explanation." And he goes, "Indeed, this has occurred just now. This murder has no known explanation." He reads on, "Suppose there is an explanation that, if only it were true, would be a very good explanation." And he thinks, well, my lead detective's hunch would in fact be a very good explanation if only it were true. So he goes on to finish the quote. "Then it is wrong to say that this event is in no more need of explanation than an otherwise similar event for which there is no explanation at all." And the chief of police would think, well, I cannot think of any other explanation for how this person was killed and how Neil deGrasse Tyson's fingerprints ended up in the crime scene, how this couple believes they saw Neil deGrasse Tyson. And based on this maxim, this crime is now more explained than an otherwise similar unexplained crime. That would be preposterous. That would be ridiculous. And perhaps a theist is in my audience saying, well, wait a minute, this is unfair. You've pitched a wholly unreasonable scenario in which you knew that this situation couldn't happen unless there was time traveling or something supernatural. So that situation couldn't possibly exist in reality. And to you, I would say, aren't there unsolved murders that exist right now? Right? Aren't there cold cases where if the chief suspect had been able to go back in time, that would do it. All the pieces would fit in place. Let's say we had two cold cases, right, that were nearly identical, but one where time travel wouldn't resolve the issue and one where time travel would. Would you really say that those murders are on different footings now because I provided time travel as a possible explanation? Would you really say, well, okay, what if this guy had discovered time travel and hasn't shared it with the rest of the world? Why would that be wrong? And the reason is because I'm submitting into the realm of the possible something that has not been demonstrated to be possible. And so I'm going to make that same response to theists when they argue, well, wait, what if there was a God behind this? Wouldn't that explain how the universe is so finely tuned? And I say the same thing to you. You have submitted as a possible explanation something that I don't know exists in the realm of the possible. We have no way of knowing that a God could exist, that this agent could exist outside of space and time, that this agent is capable of creating universes, that this God would want to create a universe with humans in it. You've just submitted all of those as possible explanations without justification. I don't think you can do that. And if you can, I don't see what would keep me from asserting time travel is a possible explanation for all unsolved murders that exist. Teleportation, time travel, spectral phenomena, all of these things now go into the realm of the possible if we're just allowed to assert them on their face. What if you're sitting here going, Ben, I don't understand why you want me to not believe. I'm not forcing you to believe what I believe. I'm not forcing you to accept my faith. I'm not forcing anyone to accept my faith. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that those people exist. And I, of course, find those people fundamentally different from evangelical Christians or people who say I'm going to go to hell because I don't believe in God. I'm with you. You're different, and I appreciate that about you. Your God model does inhibit your ability to cross certain hurdles, and you don't even necessarily recognize it. I'm going to give an example now, but even if you've already crossed that hurdle, how do you know which one isn't in the way of the next leap in progress? You don't. Let's talk about reckoning with the existence of trans people. Lots of religious folks, especially religious folks, really struggle with this one because they think, well, wait a minute. If God created humanity, if God imbues everyone with this sense of dignity, are you suggesting that God made a mistake in giving this person the genitals of one sex, but the gendered orientation of another? I don't believe God makes mistakes. How do I resolve this? And even if you adjust your God model and you meet a trans person, you go, oh shit, this person's just a regular person. They have convinced me that their experience is real. You had to expend mental effort to get there. And it might have happened at the expense of their comfort in a way that wasn't necessary. The baggage that existed only existed because of your God belief. And while I certainly applaud people who adapt their God model in response to new evidence, I definitely do. Where is there baggage that exists in you that you haven't identified yet? When's the next person you're going to make uncomfortable because of things that are buried in your ideology that you don't even recognize yet? And that's why I think it's time to drop the God belief. I really do encourage you to drop your God belief because it causes you to re-explore the world in a way that is so much more wondrous. And I used to think that the God of the universe created a world in which we are made to be in awe. I used to think that was incredibly cool. And it still is. Like I don't want to take that away from you. I don't want to say that you aren't doing awe correctly or aren't appreciating the universe correctly. You might be. I don't want to go there. What I'm saying is I have found such peace and such satisfaction in reframing a world, not needing to bring along the baggage of having to force this post hoc rationalization that God was behind it all, when maybe the answer is, fuck, we don't know. I don't know what's behind that. I don't have to. I don't need to offer an explanation. I don't need to know. I can just stare with my mouth agape and go, that is fucking cool. I don't know why. If you're a theist who just watched me give that impassioned pitch on why you should reframe your view of the universe without a God belief, you might think like, well, what do I do with the good things that my religion does? Or do you think religion produces nothing but badness? And my answer is no. You don't have to shed everything from your faith. There's good things that faith brings. I just don't think any of the supernatural beliefs have any rational grounding at all. So what do we do with the leftovers? We're going to talk about that next week. It's my final episode of this series, How Donald Trump Made Me an Atheist. It's about what we do with the things that our religion provides that might actually be good. I want to thank my patrons, Brendan, Rosemary, and Sasha. It's been so rewarding to do this, and I was really glad that you guys were able to receive something, a little bonus something last week. I hope you enjoyed it. Rosemary gave some really great feedback. I'd love to hear from any of the other patrons. And again, if you want to watch that video, it's pretty cool. I really liked doing that video. It's a different style. So please kick in a couple bucks to Patreon, and I will make sure that you have access to that video. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you next episode.